In this lecture, we're going to review the law of diminishing marginal utility. This will lead our discussion to the theory of consumer choice. We will see some illustration of the theory using utility maximizing rule. Okay. So the content of the chapter, the law of diminishing marginal utility, we bring back this law and see some illustration. The theory of consumer behavior, how consumer behave, with in mind that they have a scarce limited income, how consumer behave on the market. Utility maximizing and demand curve will be explored as well. The relationship between the income and substitution effect will bring it back to light as well. And at the end, we'll see some application and extension of the theory. Okay, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Although we know that consumer in general have insatiable want for a specific need, the more of a specific product that a consumer obtains, the less they will desire more unit of that particular product. Theory of consumer behavior use the law of diminishing marginal utility to explain how consumers allocate the limited resources or the limited income that they have. That will recall from chapter 1, we illustrate household or individual economizing problem with a budget line. And with that limitation, consumer had to have make a choice within that limitation, right? When we say choice, mean that you have alternative, and once you choose, there's opportunity. You have to forgo something to get something to be able to be within your limitation. And those are the things that we pointed out before that explain the downsloping shape of the demand curve. So let's clarify some of the terminology that we're going to use through this lecture. Utility, we defined it before, is a satisfaction that you gain by consuming a good or a service. Right? It's not the same as usefulness of that product. The usefulness, what you use the product for. And the utility is more subjective and very difficult to quantify. Right? The satisfaction that the product, the good or the service provide you, that you gain by consuming it, is different from what you use it good for. So total utility and marginal utility. But before we define total utility, I want to bring your attention to util. It's the unit, it's one unit of satisfaction. Again, it's subjective, difficult to quantify. Economists agree to use util, right? By convention, they use util as a unit to quantify that satisfaction. Same way we have a pound to quantify a weight or a kilogram, or so we use util to quantify the satisfaction or the pleasure that you gain by consuming a good or a service. The total utility, by definition, is the total amount of the satisfaction gained by consuming a product, right? Good or service. And the marginal utility, as we defined before, marginal, look at it as extra, is the extra satisfaction that you gain by consuming additional unit of a good. Okay, so that brings you back to the formula that I have down here. MU stands for marginal utility. Marginal utility equal to the change in total utility divided by the change in total quantity that you consume. Here, the delta stands for change. So delta TU over delta Q. Okay, let's see some illustration. So when we, in this slide over here, you have a schedule here that represents, in our example, is a tacos consumed per meal, and you have the total utility that derived from the consumption of the taco, and you have a marginal utility. So here are the quantity consumed and your total utility by consuming the quantity, appropriate quantity. For instance, if you don't consume anything, you don't have any total utility. By consuming one, you have 10 total utils, and 2, you have 18. The way you calculate marginal utility, also expressed in util, is the change in the total utility divided by the change in the total quantity. So in our example over here, it will be this 10 over here as our marginal utility. We get it by taking 10 minus 0 divided by 1 minus 0. The 8 over here will be 18 minus 10. The whole thing divided by 2 minus 1. So if you do that, you will see that you will get all this number over here. And you can see the illustration of a diminishing marginal utility as more of the same unit you are consuming. What happened, even though the total utility tend to increase and get to a certain level, a plateau and decline, the marginal utility diminish, right? Get to 0 and even become negative number. Okay, so if we take this table and we plot it to the graph, the top graph over here is the graph of your total utility, and the bottom one is the marginal utility. Okay. So what you see here is as more of a unit of taco consumed per meal, the total utility increase, right? The total utility, you see the total utility here increase, but at what rate? Right, increase at a diminishing rate. The first one, you have this big yellow rectangular here is greater than this one. So and so. So you can see that the total utility increases, but at a diminishing rate. It gets to the top when the curve flattens, right? The plateau here, and after that, it starts declining. Right. And at the same token, you see the marginal utility, right? Diminution, right? It diminishes. And when the total utility get to the maximum, the marginal utility is at 0. And when the total utility starts declining, you see the marginal utility become negative number. Okay. So the theory of consumer behavior, the rational behavior is the assumption that a consumer tries to use the scarce resources that they have to derive a great satisfaction. So if you think about it, you work hard for your income, you have your income, you go to the marketplace, you want to be satisfied, you want to be better off. You want to derive great satisfaction by spending every single dollar. So each consumer have a clear preference of a certain good and service available on the market, and also has an idea about how much marginal utility they might gain by consuming or purchasing additional unit of a particular good. Right. Every good have a price, and prices are not affected by the amount purchased by the consumer. So a consumer in equilibrium, when the utility is balanced, what we mean by that is the utility maximizing rule. The consumer equilibrium is when the consumer allocate every single dollar to purchase this good, and that yield to the same amount of extra or marginal utility. So the idea here is if you go to the market and spending your income, your budget on the market, you want to spend it in the way that the marginal utility per price of a good, they are all the same. But that's how we try to portray here by this algebraic formula. Right? So the equilibrium, consumer equilibrium is established when the marginal utility of one product divided by the price of that product is equal to the marginal utility of the other product divided by the price of that product until you cover all the basket, all the product that you purchase. When using the utility maximizing rule, it's very important to express the marginal utility of the good as marginal utility per dollars, because every good on the market, chances are that they all have this different price. So to be able to know that exactly how much a marginal utility you gain by consuming this additional one, it's preferable to bring that marginal utility to the price of that unit so you can see the marginal utility per price. So we'll come back to this equality, but I want you to pay attention to this equality, which is the consumer equilibrium. Now I see some numerical example of the concept. So here it is assumed that the amount of marginal utility received from additional unit of each of these two products. Example here, we have apples and oranges, right? It's independent of the quantity of the other product. So when you want to determine whether to buy apple or oranges, you will compare the marginal utility per dollars, because here you can see that the price of apple is different from the price of oranges, right? So now the consumer gonna make a choice by allocating the resources, the revenue or the income, allocating the income they have to be able to maximize the utility. So in this example over here, we can do how the rational consumer will behave. Again, this is not to explain, but this is more kind of give you the conceptual view, right? In the pedagogy, give you the view of how the consumer equilibrium is established. So in our example over here, if you look at the marginal, you compare the marginal utility per dollars for apples to the marginal utility per dollar for oranges. You know that ultimately the consumer gonna want to have the first choice here. They're gonna be oranges. Why? Because the marginal utility per dollar being higher and the consumer being rational, they want to get the first choice will be oranges. Now the second choice here, and first choice oranges here, and here the second choice, if the consumer gonna make a second choice here, it will be between the apple here and oranges tie, right? Let's say the consumer get oranges, and now the consumer gonna get, so that's 2 oranges and can purchase also 1 apple. So now with the dollar left, the consumer gonna choose again. Now you compare the utility, marginal utility per dollar for the additional units of good that the consumer will like to purchase and see which one is closer. Right, 9, so another oranges. And we have also 8, which is a tie over here. The consumer get 8 over here and get another apple also. So here you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 oranges and 2 apple here probably will complete the choice over here, because if you at 2 times 1 is $2, 4 times 2 is $8, 8 plus 2 is 10. So now you exhaust your budget. Okay, so that's the same logic over here, how the consumer will. Again, this is just an illustration of how a consumer must choose, between alternative goods with in mind that they have a limited budget. In our example, the budget is set to $10, and the consumer must purchase or make choice within that budget. Right? You choose step by step. Choice number 1, you choose one apple at 12, like we say, and 1 orange at 12, and you have apple 10. The second choice here, both of them tie, and you take 2 of them because the marginal utility per dollar is the same. Third alternative here will be orange is higher, and you have apple, right? So first, and you had the first over here, right? And you had the second oranges. So, and now you have the second apple. You have, this is still the second apple. You have now the 4th oranges over here that tied to with the apple. So if you do that exercise, you will see that at the end, by consuming that 4 oranges and 2 apple, you exhaust the totality of your income, right? First, you choose 1 orange. Second is another first choice is 1 apple, and you have second oranges, third oranges, and you had the 4th orange plus the second apple. So if you add it together, it will all gonna equal to 10, which is the totality of the income that you have to spend on the market. It's very important to understand the utility maximizing concept, utility maximizing rule, right? By understanding that, it makes it easier to see why prices and quantity demanded are inversely related. Okay, so we can look at this concept over here, which is a deriving demand curve. At the price of 2, the consumer represented in this data over here, price of 2, the quantity demanded is 4 oranges, right? So the consumer is stable at that level. But the price decline, if the price decline from 2 to 1, that would disrupt the market, right? And that disruption will have the consumer to change the quantity demanded to come out with a new equilibrium, right? So the equilibrium will be, in our case over here, the price change, the equilibrium will be restored by this particular, in this particular example for the consumer, to increase the quantity demanded from 4 to 6, by 4 oranges to 6 oranges. And that will establish a new equilibrium. So income and substitution effect. The substitution effect and income effect work together. The income effect impact the price change is the impact of the price change has on the consumer real income, right? If the price decrease, the consumer will have more flexibility because we're going to have more real income, more flexibility to purchase more good or other good. If the price increase, the consumer real income will be lower, right? So the flexibility to purchase more good or other good gonna be limited. That's why you see that inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the price when we talk about the demand curve. Okay, so the consumer tend to demand more of a particular good when the price fall. Why? Because of if the price fall, you freed up more income, and that give you that flexibility to purchase other good, right? The substitution effect is the impact that a change in product price will have on the quantity demanded of other good. If the price of a product fall, this decrease is relative expensiveness, right? If the price fall, the product become less expensive and more affordable. And then the consumer will have to substitute more of this good for the other good. Right? When the price of an item decline, consumer will no longer be at equilibrium until they reestablish that equilibrium, right? In the case, if the price decline, you are not at equilibrium, right? Until more of the item is purchased to get to that equilibrium. And the marginal utility of the item decline to match also the decline of the price. Because you keep in mind that we have the marginal utility divided by price had to be equal for all the good in the basket. So if one change, you are not at equilibrium, the marginal utility change, the price gonna change also consequently to reestablish that equilibrium. Applicability and extension of the concept. So here we have the development of a new product. If you guys recall, in the technology world, the first touch screen tablet with Apple came, and the new product changed the way we're doing things, right? Because it's a small product, and that have a large capability, right? Than if you look at big computer. So consumer look at that product as it have more utility, right? The marginal utility for the iPod was perceived as a higher, right? Perceived as a higher, and that ultimately it put attention on that particular product compared to the alternative product on the market. So the consumer shift the demand from the other product on the market toward the iPad. That major shift to iPad result in the beginning of a new thing that the mobile device, all those things that we have today. That was the beginning. If you guys recall, that was the beginning of the mobile device, from a big computer desktop to something that is more flexible, that give you the same productivity. Okay, we have also the diamond and water paradox, for instance. It is another application of the concept. Why do some good that are essential for life, like water, cost less than a diamond that is not essential to life, right? Because the marginal utility of the last unit of water consumed is small, because we consume plenty of water, right? Because we consume a lot of water compared to the marginal utility of the last unit of a diamond, right? Because again, we consume a few diamonds. So another example is a cash and non-cash gift. Even though both might have the same value, right? The same value, they yield to different utility, right? The non-cash, a gift card, yield to less utility than the cash gift card. Why that? Because the cash, the gift, give you that flexibility. It give you flexibility to do your own purchases, flexibility to prioritize your preference, choose your preference, right? Because you know what you like better than the gifter. So the cash give you that flexibility. The non-cash gift kind of narrow your flexibility, right? So that diminishes your utility. Your utility is not higher for the non-cash gift as a cash gift. The last word of this chapter, just review the cause of criminal activity, right? Consistent of the guilt that you may have because the cause of criminal activity is a guilt. The guilt that you may have by committing the act, right? Foregoing your income. But economists and law enforcement, to discourage the criminal activity, they will put more costs on it. So if you do, again, on the original, we talk about any activity, you had to weigh the cost and the benefit, right? The marginal analysis that we talk about. So if the cost is higher for most of the cost of a criminal activity, for instance, consists of the guilt, what the criminal need to purchase, or all the supplies and tools that they need to commit that crime, right? So the cost is already high for many of people, right? Most people find that cost too high compared to the benefit of committed crime. However, certain people will think or will see more benefit than committing the crime than the cost. So what the official and the economists will do is to find a way to add more to that cost, right? Things such as if you break the law, you have fines that you need to pay, possible or imprisonment when you will be losing your freedom and also your friends, right? So by adding more costs to the act of committing a crime, that will discourage a potential criminal, because again, if they do the compare the marginal cost and the marginal benefit, they will see that, okay, the marginal cost overweigh the benefit. So that will discourage people to go with the crime. A way to reduce the crime is by finding a way to increase the cost, so that when someone do the marginal analysis of any criminal activity, the marginal cost will always overweigh the benefit of committing the crime.